Welcome to Dirt Road Believer. I'm Tina and I am coming to you today from St. George Island, Florida. We are nearing the end of our vacation. We've got a couple of days left, and so we are getting out here enjoying the beach as much as possible. I tell you, I've had the best time this week just walking up and down the beach. I love to pick up seashells, so I've just been walking up and down the beach, adding to my collection. And I've had just a wonderful time in prayer and praise to the Lord and just admiring the beauty of His creation. And one of the things that's really just been going over and over in my mind is about seashells. I never thought that I could think about seashells so much in 1 week's time, but I really have. So I want to share that with y'all. Take a look at the seashells that I collected this morning. These imperfect, jagged seashells represent most of the seashells on the beach that I usually walk right past to get to the perfect seashell. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse." So, seashells, a creation of God. Everything in creation mirrors God's divinity and God's eternity. You know, He couldn't create anything that wasn't good because He is good. You'll remember in Genesis, after He created everything, He deemed it good. And shells make me think about God's divine nature and His eternal power through Christ. As I said, I love to go shelling, and I have quite a collection of beautiful, perfect shells. The ones that I showed you, you know, they've got pieces out of them, they're cracked, they're ruddy, some of them have scars like this one here. So I began to think more about the shells that I'm overlooking than the shells that I go for. You know, I walk past millions of broken, shattered, abused, worn out shells to pick up that one perfect, uncompromised, untouched shell. And I thought about Jesus on the beach when he was inviting His disciples to come have breakfast with Him, and He had time to kill. He was on the beach. I'm sure there were shells. So I'm sure Jesus on the shore at some time picked up and just thought about the shells that His Father had made. And what if Jesus was shelling? What kind of shells would He picked up? And you know, He would have bags and bags and bags of broken shells. It was a struggle for me this morning to pick up these broken, tattered shells when I wanted to just bypass them and go to these beautiful, perfect shells. But I believe that He saw us in those seashells, and I've really connected to shells this week and the way that I look and see them differently in the way that I look at them. See, what I learned about shells is they aren't just broken down over time due to the elements. Mostly they're broken down by a long list of organisms whose specialty is biodegrading empty shells into these tiny little fragments that we see up and down our beaches. And isn't this us in our relationships with other people that God puts in our paths? Sometimes they seem to just break us down, to use us up. And perhaps if we hadn't allowed ourselves to get so close to some people, maybe we would look more like a perfect shell. Maybe we would be whole and beautiful and not have any imperfections. Perhaps, you know, that spouse that ended in divorce, or that troubled child that we've had to deal with, or that backstabbing coworker, or perhaps even a relationship you started at church that ended in pain and hurt. Perhaps if we didn't have all those in our life, we would look more like perfect shells. But the reality is that God puts people in our paths, broken people, and we begin to look like those broken shells, those worn out shells. We have holes in places. We have edges that are broken off due to our relationships. And you know what? God wouldn't have it any other way. He puts people in our path to refine us. And perhaps when you look at God refining you, maybe you look at the eternal consequence. Maybe you look at that whole perfect, wonderful being that you're going to be one day. But I look at the refining process here on earth, and I see that it looks more like those shells. God's refining process will eventually result in a beautiful, perfect being, or perfect shell, if you will. But I say, God, use me up. Use me up as long as I'm on this earth. Let those relationships, those people who need to be nourished by me, those people who need to feed off me, those people who need to be strengthened by me, Lord, through you, let them use me completely up. And you know what happens to those little pieces of broken shell? Eventually, they become the sand beneath my feet. So wouldn't that be awesome if God used me up to the point that when I'm no longer here, I am still the foundation beneath somebody's feet? Oh, not because of who Tina is, but because of who God was through me. Hebrews 12:2 says, "For the joy set before him endured the cross." Fix our eyes on Jesus, because the joy set before him, he endured the cross. When he was talking about the joy, he wasn't talking about the cross. That was the worst, most painful thing that anybody had ever put him through on earth. The joy was what came after the cross. So as we endure hardships, as we endure relationships that can sometimes be so painful, and maybe you're going through something right now, maybe you're going through a divorce, maybe a friend has hurt you deeply, maybe you have a child right now that is so lost and so far from what you taught them that it is absolutely painful for you. I want to tell you that there is a refining happening. And I was talking to a friend just this morning about that refining process. It doesn't always look like refinement into that perfect, beautiful, wonderful shell. Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there, and we'll be there for eternity one day. But now it can be painful. So I want you to think about those broken shells along the beach that have broken down because another organism needed the nutrients that were from it. And when you look at those painful relationships, think, God has put me in this person's life, however difficult the relationship may be, because through Jesus Christ, I have something to offer them. And trust him to guide you in that relationship. I thank you so much for joining me today and going down this road of seashells and beach, and how God just kind of opened up a connection for me with his creation. But since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen. Thank you, Lord, for helping me to clearly see your divine nature and how your nature is mirrored in seashells. I thank you so much for being with me. Please like, share, subscribe, and slow down and take the dirt road, believer.